What's up, everybody? Rob here, and there were no fights this past weekend, so we weren't really sure if we were gonna do a pod this week. But I don't know. I was thinking about the whole John Jones situation this week, and I kind of wanted to hop on here and do a solo pod, or maybe more of like a rant at this point about it. But I don't know. I was just kind of curious what some of you guys think about this whole situation, and maybe what you think about my take on it. And I think anyone who's following MMA closely or even loosely at this point knows what's been going on with John Jones and Tom Aspinall. It's the fight to make in the heavyweight division, the champion versus the interim champion. It doesn't get much simpler than that, right? But it's been held up. It seems like John Jones isn't really that motivated to fight Tom Aspinall, and a lot of people are mad at him for that, and I also get that because this is a type of sport where there should be that kind of passing of the torch in the cage, or at least that opportunity for a fighter to get the torch passed to them. But the thing is, I see a lot of people blaming John, and I get that. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of people aren't looking towards the UFC. And this is a company that stripped champions over much less. I mean, remember Tony Ferguson when he was the interim champion and he tripped over the cord and they stripped him because of that? And then even I go back and I think about like George St. Pierre when he fought Johnny Hendricks, and he said in the cage, just kind of impulsively, just that he wanted to take some time off, and that was so unexpected to everybody in the UFC. And then Dana White went on that whole rant afterwards talking about how George owes it to the company, the fans, to Johnny Hendricks to give him that shot because he came so close. And the thing I feel about this fight is like, yeah, you have to put some of the blame on John because John's the champion and he's choosing to not defend his belt in a timely manner. And with the heavyweight division right now, there's been like no title fights. There hasn't been one in 2025. There was one in 2024. I think one in 23. I'm trying to think if there even was one in 2022 for the heavyweight title. I don't know if there was. Oh, Ngannou, Francis Ngannou, and Cyril Gane. I don't know. This is just such an odd situation, and I don't understand why all of the blame is going towards John and then none of it is going towards the UFC, because the UFC ultimately has the power to decide if John should stay champion or not. And, a lot of people are like, well, strip him. Like, yeah, yeah. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, the UFC's decision making with the heavyweight division over the past few years, honestly, has just made no sense. And like, when you think about it, yes, John Jones going up to heavyweight was a great idea, and I think everyone was still pretty excited that that happened, because it was a question that we had for a really long time if John was ever going to go up there. And I definitely value his win over Cyril Gane. I thought that was incredible. And then, but after that, they booked the Stipe fight at first, which even then you're kind of like, because Stipe, when you look at Stipe's resume, obviously he's earned a super fight like that. But at the same time, this is a dude who, when they booked that fight, he still hasn't had a win since 2020. And that win was over Daniel Cormier, who retired right after it. So it's puzzling that they even gave him the shot to begin with, but I get it. It's, the pay-per-view business. It's a fight that would sell. Two big names, two legends of the sport. It's not any disrespect towards Stipe. I get why they felt that he'd earned a fight like that. But again, it's just towards the UFC again. Like, that, they book that fight, and then obviously it gets canceled because of the injury, John Jones's injury. And then Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich gets booked. They have that fight. Aspinall has a great win, wins the interim title. Even then, I could kind of understand wanting the Stipe fight to happen, but it's like, how long were we going to have to wait? And then by the time it did happen, the interim champion had already had another insane title defense in 2024 and in July. And it just baffles me how they even continued to want to make the John Jones Stipe fight. Because for one, like, what's the point of having an interim champion if he's not going to be the next person to fight for the belt? It just doesn't really make any sense. And then, they have the fight with John and Stipe, and John runs right through him because, let's face it, that wasn't the best Stipe in there. And again, it's a Stipe Miocic who retired right after. And it's just really puzzling. And now we're sitting here waiting on this fight, John Jones versus Tom Aspinall. They need to make this fight, or they need to have some sort of action, because right now the heavyweight division is so stagnant. I think it's probably one of the worst divisions in the UFC, if not the worst. And we're not getting any title fights. Yes, some of the blame goes on John Jones, but at the same time, this is a dude who's proven everything. He doesn't need to fight Tom Aspinall, in my opinion, to solidify his legacy. But at the same time, Tom Aspinall deserves that chance to fight for the undisputed heavyweight title. So it's either like book the fight with John or strip him. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why the UFC is not doing anything about it. And it makes them look weak in a sense, because John's just on social media trolling, and Tom Aspinall's sitting here like, I don't know what I should even do. Because, yeah, you want to stay active, but then you're risking losing this chance. It's tough because he's defended the interim title. Like, it makes no sense. I don't know. Like, I've been thinking about it a lot this week, because I've seen so many posts about it. And then I see John in the comments kind of being cheeky and, just trolling fans and stuff like that. And that's all well and good. I think in a way he's almost setting himself up to be a heel. But again, like, I get wanting to blame John, but the UFC, in my opinion, is more responsible for this, because they're the ones who can actually do something about it, and they're not. We've had no heavyweight title fights this year, and I'm not even sure if we're going to. I think about the future of the schedule for the UFC. We have 317, 318, 319 booked. When you think about 320, that's the one that's going to be in Mexico. I just have this weird feeling that that's going to be Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez, because Evloev said on social media that the UFC is going in a different direction with Volk, and then he's going to have a fight, I think, in July. So, and I would imagine that might be against Aaron Pico. It seems like what the rumor mill has been, spinning. But I just, when you think past that, you have the Abu Dhabi card right after. I would imagine they're going to try and get JDM versus Islam on that card. That's just a hunch, And then I think about, after that, that's the MSG card, and you would think that's the card that they wanted on, but it just seems like there's no progress to moving in that direction. And like, again, that lies more on the UFC than it does on John. John Jones has earned the right to kind of just coast a little bit and, really enjoy life and kind of, what's the word? Like, enjoy the fruits of his labor. And again, like, he owes Tom Aspinall a chance, but at the same time, if John doesn't want to give him that chance, to me, that's totally fine. But just give up the belt. But the UFC needs to step in and do something about it, because why would John just vacate the title? I think that there's a lot of pride that he has being the UFC heavyweight champion, and so I just don't see him vacating it on his own. But the UFC needs to do something, because there's just been nothing going on right now in the heavyweight division. The only buzz about it is talking about this fight that we're not even sure if we're going to get, because it's been so delayed and it makes no sense. I just think that the UFC needs to do something about it. And that's ultimately like kind of why I hopped on here and gave this little rant to do maybe a little solo pod this week for you guys, because there were no fights. But I don't know. I mean, that, again, this is all just my opinion, and I have really no hate towards any of the fighters involved. Like, I'm a pretty big John Jones fan, but again, like, I want to see him fight Tom Aspinall. I think it would be a huge fight, and I think if he could win that fight, oh my God, like, what does that do for his legacy? I mean, he's already arguably the greatest of all time without this fight. Imagine if he wins it. And for Tom Aspinall, again, like, he deserves this. He deserves this chance. And he deserves a shot to become the undisputed heavyweight champion, whether that be in the cage versus John Jones, or if they strip John and just promote Tom to be undisputed champ. I just don't understand the UFC's lack of action. I just don't get it. They have the power to do something about it, and they don't. And it makes them look very odd. It just really makes no sense. And yeah, again, that's why I wanted to hop on here, just give my take on the whole situation, because it seems like everybody's kind of giving their take on it right now. And, I figured, no, what better time to do it than now, because there's no fights to break down in the UFC from this past weekend. But yeah, I don't know. Again, this is all just my opinion. I think that the blame lies more on the UFC ultimately than it does on John Jones. John Jones has enough money. He's done enough in the sport that he's earned the right to do what he wants. But at the same time, the UFC needs to step in and do something about this so the heavyweight division can move. Because right now, with Tom Aspinall, you're wasting the prime of what could possibly be a once-in-a-generation type talent. And I think he's earned the chance to prove that in the cage. But right now, there's just seems like there's no progress on this John Jones fight being made for Tom Aspinall. So ultimately, again, the responsibility is on the UFC. They need to step in and do something about this, whether it be booking this fight, stripping John Jones, just something. Because it seems like we're going nowhere, and it doesn't seem like Tom Aspinall knows where it's going either. He's talked about the mental fatigue of just feeling like you're preparing for this fight that you don't even know if it's going to happen. And yeah, it's just unfortunate because it makes John look bad. And then at the same time, again, you're wasting the prime of this awesome talent and someone who I truly think has superstar potential in Tom Aspinall. And the UFC has just been sitting on their hands. And I think that it's honestly pretty unacceptable. I think the fans want to see the heavyweight division, thrive again like it did when Stipe was champ or when Cain Velasquez was champ. And right now it's just so stagnant, and that's really unfortunate, But yeah, that's all I wanted to come on here and say. Just wanted to give my opinion on the whole situation. And, ultimately I want to ask you guys too, tell me in the comments what you guys think. And, I just want to have I'm curious what a lot of fans think, because I know everybody wants to only blame John Jones. But again, I really think that the UFC has more of a role in this. And I'm curious what you guys think of how the UFC has handled this, how much of the responsibility lies on John versus on the UFC. I'm genuinely curious what you guys think, because maybe it'll kind of enhance my own opinion or maybe even change my mind a little bit. But yeah, that's my take on the whole situation. Very curious what you guys think. Comment. I really want to know. Also, be sure to subscribe to the pod. We got plenty of fun stuff coming up throughout the summer. Obviously, some crazy cards coming up, both pay-per-views and fight nights. It's going to be a fun summer, definitely, on the channel. And hopefully we have some more interesting stuff in the works that we can announce to you guys maybe later in the year. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Subscribe if you enjoyed. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week talking about Blanchfield versus Barber.
Feel just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. This the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.